I am now.
All right, thank you. It's 9:31 on Monday, the 22nd, 2021. And as chair of Division 3 of the House Finance Committee, I find that due to the state of emergency declared by the governor as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic and in accordance with the governor's emergency order number 12, which was pursuant to Executive Order 2020-04 as extended, this public body is authorized to meet electronically. Please note that there is no physical location to observe and listen contemporaneously to this meeting, which was authorized pursuant to the governor's emergency order. However, in accordance with the emergency order, I'm confirming several things. We are providing access to the meeting to the public by telephone and by Zoom. The committee is using Zoom for this remote meeting. All members of the committee and the staff of state agencies with agenda items have the ability to communicate contemporaneously during this meeting through the platform. And the public has access to contemporaneously watch and or listen to the meeting on Zoom. Or they could use the telephone following the directions and links provided in the House calendar, starting with House Calendar 8, going through House Calendar 16. So as I just mentioned, the instructions for following this telephonically are in the House calendar. If you cannot listen in real time to what we're doing, you're encouraged to email us at lba_fiscal@leg.state.nh.us. And if you're not able to, if we do get an email with indicating there are problems, we'll adjourn and reschedule. So please note that all votes taken during this meeting will be done by roll call. And with that, Representative Bean, are you ready to take a roll?
Yes, sir. Representative Wallner.
Representative Wallner is here, and I'm in my home in Concord, and I'm alone.
Representative Nordman.
Representative Nordgren is here in my dining room / office in Hanover.
Representative Rogers.
Catherine Rogers. I'm here in Concord in my apartment with my dog Romeo.
Representative Earth. I'll come back to him, I guess. Representative Edwards.
Representative Edwards, I'm in my home office in Auburn, and I have my door shut, even though I have family members in the house. And I just called Representative Earth, and there he is.
I'll go back to him. Representative Earth.
Present, home alone in my home office. Sorry, I lost track of time.
I'm Representative Bean. I'm home. I'm at my home in Guilford. My wife is around about, and Representative Weiler. Representative Weiler is late. As 6 accounted for, 1 late.
All right, thank you for that. So let's start off by reviewing the work plan. So Mr. Ripple, I copied you in on an email earlier this morning at 6:57. Could you open that? And then specifically what I'd appreciate you sharing is the image that's in there.
Sure.
Okay, and can you shrink that a little bit so that we're just seeing the image?
Yeah, I'm not sure that I can.
Okay, we can scroll.
All right.
All right, so this morning, I'd like to start us out by, I put exec. I guess technically there's a different name since we're effectively a subcommittee of the whole finance committee, but we'll use the procedures for executing bills, and we'll talk about HB 600 and take a vote. Then to get oriented to where we are in the overall budget process, Mr. Ripple has put together a sheet that shows the adjustments that we've agreed to based predominantly on votes that we've already been taken. I think there might be a line item in there relative to the A&M expectations, but generally those are reflecting votes we've taken. There's a second sheet that basically shows a summary of all of that, and that's going to be have to be updated probably after some votes today. I'd like us to specifically look at the Veterans Home part of the budget, the totals, and plan on what we want to do with that. For a while, I thought Representative Rogers was going to have an amendment on Section 35 relative to the A&M. And so I published this before hearing this morning that she does not have an amendment on Section 35, but she does have one on 34, which is all fine. We're going to discuss some SYSC House Bill 2s. I don't think they're out of OLS. Maybe they'll be out of OLS this afternoon. We'll see. There are several of them, as I understand, but we have enough information where I think we can discuss them intelligently. And then I just wanted to touch base again on the 12 April meeting that we're going to have as a division relative to the new forensic hospital, just to make sure we're sharing, because it's a little unusual. I just want to make sure everyone's on the same page. We're going to recess at that point until 2:30. And as I mentioned before we started the meeting, the reason that I picked 2:30 is because Representatives Erf and Weiler have a county meeting that they need to go to relative to the county budgets. And they should be back by 2:30. Also, we've got a number of amendments that we've asked OLS to produce for us, and they're working on them right now. So hopefully they'll be done by 2:30. We are going to talk about HB 254. There's a concept there that we'll talk about this afternoon. We'll need an Hb2 section to have a comprehensive discussion. So that's why that's after 2:30 and not this morning. We're going to talk and hopefully vote on sections 26 and 34. 34 discussion could take quite a while. That'll be between committee members. Then as we looked at the budget and deeper into the MMIS money that was in the operating budget, it seemed like a big chunk of that ought to be moved over to HB2. So we'll talk about that. There's a personnel HB2 to discuss. There's a back of the budget HB2 to discuss. And then we just have some opportunity for discussion and votes. If you could go back up, Mr. Ripple, to where we can see the words for the Tuesday and Wednesday there. That's good. So because it's in the House calendar, I have to start the meeting at 9:30, but we'll probably immediately go into recess at 2 o'clock on both days. And we will only meet if we have a reason to meet. What could cause us to have a reason to meet? Well, if in our discussions, it seems to be clear that we need OLS to do some more work, we would send the work over today, for example, and then by 2 o'clock tomorrow, they should have had time to produce any results that we've asked them to. And I don't want to be doing this, but these are typical project management slack days that have been programmed in here just so that we absolutely positively know we're going to be done by Wednesday, the 24th. And Representative Rogers, your hand is up.
Yes, the amendment that I have is not to section 34. It's a amendment to House Bill 1 on the funding on family planning. So I just want to clear that up.
Okay, no, that's a good clarification. And Representative Erf has one of those as well. And so we'll have an opportunity to take a look at at least a couple of options there. So, okay, so that's the orientation to the day. Are there other questions about the orientation to the day? I'm not seeing any. So, Mr. Ripple, if you could bring up House Bill 600.
Sure, just one moment.
So while we're waiting for that, I'll just say that this is one part of why I like Zoom, you know, because if we were all sitting in person in a committee, it would be harder for us to have a way to make sure we're all looking at the same document at the same time. And I was on Ways and Means, and it was just really hard to follow where things were that were being discussed. And so I like this aspect of Zoom. So even if we win, I think it's more of a win. I hope that we can maintain this Zoom component because I think it's a very powerful communication tool. So that free editorial aside, we took testimony on HB 600 last week. There was a good discussion. I think you may recall Representative Marsh introducing the bill and speaking at length to it and taking questions. There was a testimony that talked also about by Anthem saying that they had not really had an opportunity to be informed of this issue, and that they had a point of view that they were paying for this as a bundled DRG or a bundled service. And I can appreciate that point of view. But I think today I'm ready to entertain a motion to recommend OTP to HB 600. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Sorry, before you do that, did you want to introduce the amendment? Typically, you would vote on you had an amendment to change the effective date. Typically, you would vote on the amendment first and then on the bill as amended.
Oh, I thought it was the other way around. But
Nope.
Okay. I just remembered it the other way, which is not uncommon for me to be totally backwards. Representative Weiler has joined us. So welcome, Representative Weiler. Representative Bean took a role earlier, and you look busy there, sir. Are you ready to be our clerk, or do you want Representative Bean to continue for a while?
Just finding the tally sheets. Give me a second.
Okay, so this was a simple amendment to HB 600. You may recall some discussion of whether or not 60 days was sufficient for the department to implement a change. And kind of the thing that seemed to probably take the longest in their administrative changes was that they needed to have some code in their system updated. And of course, when you do that, you have to design it, you got to update it, you got to test it, you got to verify it, and then you got to cut over and go live with it. So they, Dr. Chirilla asked for 120 days instead of the 60 days. And the bill sponsor, as I recall, did not have an issue with this. So are you ready? It looks like Representative Weiler is still getting organized. So I'll entertain a motion to adopt amendment ending in 0899H.
I would move that we adopt amendment 0899H to HB 600.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Representative Bean. Is there discussion on this amendment? Representative Wallner, did you have some? I couldn't tell if you were moving to speak.
No, I'm sorry, I'm not.
I think I'm batting about 80% with your movement towards the screen, which isn't horrible. Okay,
And do
so
you need a second right now?
we got one from
Okay,
Representative.
great, thank you. Good.
So are you ready, Representative Weiler? If you're ready, can you call a roll?
Okay, this is a motion to adopt the amendment 0899H. Representative Earth,
Yes.
Representative Weiler votes yes. Representative Bean,
Yes.
Representative Wallner,
Yes,
Representative Nordgren,
yes,
Representative Rogers,
yes,
Representative Edwards.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, the vote is 7-0.
All right, thank you. So with that amendment passed, we can look at HB 600. And at this point, we're looking at HB 600 with I'd like a motion to OTPA.
I'd move that we OTPA HB 600.
For a second.
I'll
Okay,
second.
Representative Wallner has seconded. Is there any discussion? Let's wait for Mr. Ripple to flip us to the HB 600 screen. And again, we wouldn't normally do this in person, but since we can, I just like it. Visual information is good information. Okay. All right. So with a motion and a second to OTPA HB 600, is there any discussion? I'll add a little discussion. I got an email. I did an email exchange with Ms. Sue Dunlap. I believe it's Dunlap, not Dunlop. But in any case, she said to me that they think Anthem, for example, is paying for these testing services under a bundled service rate. And I had listened to the HHSEA committee hearing and to our own, and that point never stuck out to me during testimony. Maybe the point was made and I just missed it. It's a point I don't think I would have missed, but to be fair to her and to kind of complete the record, I just want people to know that she believes that they're paying for it as a bundled rate, and that we didn't hear that in testimony. So what I told her was two things will happen today. This will either fail and she doesn't need to worry about it, or this will pass and she can work with the Senate to get that part of her testimony better understood than the way I understood it. So I think that's fair to her and fair to the insurance companies. And I intend to vote in favor of OTPA on HB 600. Is there any other question? Any other comment? Okay, not seeing any. Mr. Clerk, would you take the roll?
The vote is ought to pass as amended on House Bill 600. Representative Earth,
Yes.
Representative Weiler votes yes. Representative Bean,
Yes.
Representative Wallner,
yes,
Representative Nordgren,
yes,
Representative Rogers,
yes,
Representative Edwards.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, the vote is 7-0.
Thank you. So what I think that means is Division 3 is forwarding this to Finance so that Finance will will Finance have to hold another meeting on this, or will this go straight to a Finance Committee exec?
It'll go straight to a finance committee exec session.
Yeah. the finance committee will be executing all the bills passed by the various divisions. We'll start with Division 1, Division 2, Division 3, when we have our exec session, probably this.
Okay, so just technically, so I'm learning the words here. Our division didn't exec it. We recommended to the finance committee to exec it. Is that the way that?
That's the correct terminology.
All right, thank you, sir. And thank you for concurring, Representative Wallner. I saw your head shake.
Yeah.
So, Mr. Ripple, if you could show the Division 3 document that you updated as of this morning.
Sure.
Okay, I want to start with this overview document that Mr. Ripple has put together because it itemizes a lot of things that we've agreed to and some things that we've not fully discussed. But the first line item is an easy one. So coming off of using as a baseline the governor's proposed budget, we've added 14.5 million this first year and 14.5 million the second year to the county cap line. We voted on that 7-0 when we looked at the details. Does anyone want to revisit that? I think Representative Rogers, your hand is up. We're going to go through each of these and talk about each of them to the extent people want to talk about them. So,
Can this be enlarged? I can't read it at all.
oh, I believe it can.
And
Does that help?
Kevin, is it possible to send this to us in an email so that
Yep.
I can print it off real quick and write some notes on
Sure.
the lines?
So let's do that. It's 9:53. Let's take a sort of a bio break and an ingestion break so that people can look at this and think about it before we really get into it. So let's take a bio break until 10 o'clock. I have it at 9:53 right now. And then Mr. Ripple, while you're sending that, would you send the second document, which is the summary?
Yep, sure.
Okay. I think it's 9:59, but it looks like everyone's ready to go. So, Mr. Ripple, if you could return to sharing that document.
Yep.
Okay, and so for those of you that worked with me this weekend, you'll note that the date on this version is 3/22, which is today. So some of these are going to require a discussion just to get us in sync. So we just talked about the first line there. It's not numbered, but it's the $14.5 million a year line for the county cap. And I need to figure out how to see people and see the document. Okay. So is there any discussion on this? I think we have discussed it and decided on this. Anyone wanting to revisit it? Okay, so the next one, the enhanced FMAP for Development Service and Child Health Insurance Program. This was $12 million that was essentially newfound revenue in the estimate because of the enhanced FMAP being applied to all components of Medicaid and not just the main account. So this $12 million increase in revenues for us is basically just getting the budget document to reflect reality. So this was kind of a correction, I think, to the budget. Is there any conversation around the enhanced FMAP being reflected or the amount? I'm only able to see like 5 people at a time in this view. So Representative Nordgren, I'm not seeing you. I just don't want to accidentally miss you if you're waving your hand. Representative Wallner?
I just wanted to check, Kevin, and Representative Edwards, is that that's the amount that Karen told us last week?
For the enhanced FMAP, yes, it is. And that's the number. You did actually vote on that one already last week.
Okay, great, thank you.
And to be clear, that's the number we voted on. It was.
Yes.
Thank you.
You have any other questions? Anyone? figured out how I can see all of you now, by the way. So if you just wave your hand at me, I think I can see you. All right, so eliminate SYSC, a one-time transition costs added to HB2. Basically, this removes 12.3 million in FY23 from the department's budget. The note about one-time transition costs added to HB2. I think if you look down there, which could you highlight for us? Is that the 2.65 million, Mr. Ripple, down under HB2 adjustments?
For the transition costs, yes.
Okay.
Didn't
So
highlight it, but it's this one right here.
right. Okay. So yes, the documents reflect closing it in the second year, but the transition costs are things like, you know, mothballing buildings, retraining people. Those are in those on Mr. DeJoy's list. Representative Wallner, do you have a question?
I do. I wondered if, Kevin, how are we doing on the amendment? Is it the SYC amendment? Is it done at this point?
It's not done. I think I may have received one component. There were 9 individual components, and so I've asked OLS to draft them as individual amendments and as one comprehensive amendment because I didn't know which you and Representative Weiler would want to offer. I believe I've received one of the 9, but I haven't had a chance to look at it yet. So I'm thinking it'll be this afternoon before we've received the entire package.
Okay, so on this section, my question would be, would you really want to be taking savings and adding in House Bill 2 until we have really made our final decision on what we're going to do with that amendment?
I think you're absolutely dead on there, Representative Wallner. And what I'm looking at, the way I'm looking at this document right now is it's like an 80–90% good draft, but it's good enough for us to see all in one place all the issues we've talked about. And so Mr. Ripple is prepared to update this based on any additional votes and decisions we make today. But the paint is not dry here.
Thank you. I would like to see the amendment on the Sununu Center before I
Absolutely. And so
really before I felt really firm on these figures.
And just to flash what I think we'll probably end up having to do, I think this issue alone of updating this document is probably reason enough for us to plan on coming back tomorrow afternoon at 2:30 just to put the finishing touches on things. But today I'm expecting to get through, you know, the big conversations. Is that
That's clear. Thank you.
so your hand is still up, but
Oh, sorry. Why don't I just wave at you?
all right, so let's rewind and try that again. So we are saying we're shutting down the Sununu Center. We're incurring a $12.3 million savings in the second year, and we're anticipating one-time transition costs of 2.6 million in the first year in order to facilitate that happening. Representative Weiler, do you have any conversations? You've had the most conversations with Mr. DeJoy. Do you want to speak to this at all?
No, I think once we see the separate parts, but probably we could go over the 9 separate parts, which Kevin has made the trouble of coming in 9 separate, and then we could, if we don't have any problems with any of them, I'd like to adopt it as one amendment. But when we see it all, we'll be looking at it. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Okay, so this is new to about half of us. As we were looking and talking about the MMIS line item that's in the operating budget, and thinking about what we heard, what it seems is that the line item that is funding the contractors in HB1, that's for legacy systems to operate while we're phasing in new systems. And the idea is that these legacy systems should go away. And we don't want our operating budget to reflect a tremendously high artificial rate of having two systems running in parallel at the same time. So the legacy systems, I think, should be reflected in the operating budget because that's our go forward operating plan. And this would move the legacy maintenance costs to HB2 under the belief that that's the right way to treat what effectively is a one-time cost. The dollar amounts there reflect the amount of the MMIS budget that was related to writing checks to the contractors that maintain that system, the MMIS system. In an ideal world with perfect accounting information, we could just do a quick sort and figure out how much of that money is for the legacy system and how much of it really is going to have to stay in operation after the phase into the new system. In other words, the 12.4 million probably is more of a hybrid than it should be ideally of both legacy costs and ongoing future costs. But we don't have the accounting data to show what a better split on that would be. So in talking to Kevin and, excuse me, Mr. Ripple and Ms. Rounds, it just seemed like the cleanest thing to do was to just put the whole contractor line in there and move it to HB2. But there could be easily different points of view. Are there any comments on that? So what I'm not hearing is a basic agreement that by moving the contract line over to HB2, we're treating it as a one-time cost, and that due to our lack of visibility into the cost details, we're going to accept the assumption that that whole line is for the legacy system. See, I think I'm saying things that people who aren't in IT should understand, but I don't know that I am because I've dealt with IT people so much. So is there any confusion about what I'm saying? I don't want to just assume agreement when there isn't, because I'm not explaining it. So Mr. Weiler, or Representative Weiler, just gave me a thumbs up. I think it's understood. So we're going to see an HB2 on this afternoon, are we not? If OLS delivers?
Yes, you will.
Thank you. Okay, so the next line item is the governor's budget reflected a pretty significant growth over the current budget in terms of the number of personnel assigned to the department. And in looking at the vacancies, I went through and anticipated that we could reduce 180 of them, which would still do two things. If we had it at 180, which was my initial thought on this, is that we would have left enough vacancies in the department for them to be able to grow, continue to grow some. And they could grow with a little bit of flexibility, in that it was a big enough number to where everyone who is hired today could get their step increases and promotions, and none of them would have their positions at risk. So 180 was kind of in my view, a comfortable number for the department to keep growing into, albeit at a much slower rate and at a much lower ceiling. On the ceiling issue, it didn't seem to me to be a big deal because we have workforce shortages everywhere. Every department is talking about workforce shortages. I talked to people in industry, at hospitals, everyone is having workforce shortages. So that's another way of me saying, I don't think the governor's budget on personnel was really realistic because we have such workforce shortages. We could carry that head count on the books, we could budget for it, but because of the workforce shortage, we're never going to hire for it anyways. So why not have our budget reflect more reality? So that was my thinking on the 180 number. So for those that would like to know how I got to 226, based on some discussions in the last 24 hours, there's been a request to do the absolute most that Division 3 can do to bring the budget to a point where it can be passed. 226, I think, is that number. I haven't done the math or the science on it, but in my instincts of 40 years of doing this stuff, 226, I think, is kind of the lowest we can go on the personnel limbo. And so this morning I asked Mr. Ripple to update the HB2 to reflect 226 instead of 180. So that's new information to you, Representative Weiler, because you and I had talked about 180, and now I'm showing you 226 in kind of a public meeting. So I apologize for that, but given the time pressures we're under, I thought I should go ahead and take this opportunity to do that.
Let me ask you a question.
Go ahead, say you were on mute, sir.
Okay. Are we still having something saying in the back of the budget that you've got to cut more things, or is this?
Yes, sir. That's the next line. That's the next line. The two lines work together, personnel reduction, department-wide reduction. So I think you're referring to the second line. All right. Representative Rogers, your hand was up.
Yeah.
And then Representative Wallner.
When you were talking about cutting 100 people,
Yeah.
the department basically said that was going to do a lot to hurt the department. 226 positions is going to devastate the department. You might talk about industry and other departments, but here we're talking about staff that's dealing with our most vulnerable people in the state. They're dealing with our children, they're dealing with our elderly, they're dealing with people that have serious developmental problems. They're dealing with our most vulnerable, and we're trying desperately to get people into these jobs. And now you want to cut more of them. I think that what you're doing between that and your next item, we might as well just shut the doors at Health and Human Services. I could never vote for this budget with this in there. And I think that I can speak for a number of people in our caucus. If what you're saying is that you don't want a Democratic vote on this budget, I think that's what you're going to get with these two items.
Thank you for that. I would just point out that the department is operating now, and that this leaves them with a head count greater than what they have now. So
They won't be here in 2 years if you do these things.
I know it would make their job more difficult, and that they would have to go back to the drawing board and really rethink their priorities for additional headcount, and that they may have to go back and take some headcount that is currently occupied and move it to something that they consider more valuable or more value added. Like, for example, there's 96 people on the staff of the Sununu Center. That's 96 people that could be reprogrammed to fill positions that I think would have more value to the state. So it looks like a big number in isolation, but given that it's more than they have now, and that they've got the 96 at the Sununu Center that we're trying to free up, it's not quite as bad. You get with the, if you subtract the 96 from the 226, you're getting pretty close to that 100 I initially mentioned. So I don't expect you to agree with me. I don't expect your vote. My job is to be as clear and transparent as I can be on this. Representative Waller.
Well, I was going to ask the same question when I left here last week. I thought that Karen had come forth with a reluctant proposal. It was definitely reluctant on her part, but she was trying to be reasonable, I thought, and she brought in 100 positions. The idea of a back of the budget 100 positions. We've now more than doubles that. And, you know, I think that for the last year, the department has really been having to function under a crisis mode. And we need to help them get back to where they're functioning in a non-crisis mode. Between the pandemic and losing a lot of employees, I'm sure, who needed to be home with family, and maybe some who decided I've got to retire. I'm sure there's a whole bunch of reasons why there is a very large vacancy rate right now. But I think we need to all be working towards helping the department get back to normal, where they can really provide the kind of services that we need in New Hampshire. So I'm very disappointed to see the 100. I was worried about the 100, and I'm more than double worried about the 226.
Yes, ma'am. I don't have much different to say than what I just said to Representative Rogers. Similar concern. I would just want to reemphasize that given their vacancy rate as of the 11th of March, that after imposing this paperwork reduction, because it's not a real reduction, and it's not a real reduction because due to their vacancy rate, they have a really strong number of people that they could still add to their payroll before they hit this new threshold. So it's not crippling in the sense that if they just take a time out, take a look at what their priorities are, they have vacancies that they could move around to priorities and probably be fine and be better off than they were this year, certainly. And the pandemic will eventually go away. And so the crisis management will go away, and they can go back to methodical planning and executing with a higher personnel count that they've had during the pandemic. So I don't view it as bleak as been described, but I can understand your perspective. Representative Nordgren.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. I think for the people listening in, it would be helpful to explain again, and it could be I glazed over because I was astounded at the number, but explain again the 226 positions. Are some of these people already employed at Health and Human Services, or are these people that would have been new hires in their budget?
Okay, so if we were to look at, I think that's a fair question, but I'll get to the main thing you're asking. I think is, if we go forward with this level, does this force the department to terminate anyone who's been hired? The answer to that is definitively no. It would not force them to do that. They would still have plenty of room to do that. Would it force them to forego or make it difficult for them to do agreed upon step increases or to pay for the personnel benefits? No, it's all still in there. And it's all still in there because they had 507 vacancies department-wide as of the 11th of March. And so by, and then in the governor's budget was anticipating growing the head count to 3226. So this 226 cut would take them to 3,000 department-wide. Well, as of the 11th of March, department-wide, they had 2,646 people employed. So there's 400 people that they still need to go find in a situation with workforce shortages and onboard them. And so I think they have room to grow. This is not the kind of cut that I took several times in corporate America, where you just had to cut, period. And government is protected from the realities of the real world, because here we are in an economic crisis and we're debating how much we should grow headcount. And in my proposal here, they're still able to grow headcount considerably. And I think it's probably more than they'll actually be able to hire. So I think it'll be tough, and from a management perspective, of having to be really careful about what they're doing. But I believe that we've hired good enough managers that they're up to the task. So do you have a follow-on, or you?
Well, I just wanted to maybe take issue with the fact that we have an economic crisis. It's my understanding that the Ways and Means Committee is came up with more money at the end of the week, and I would just think that needs to be something we discuss soon to see what we're doing with that money.
Sure. I think there's still a large number of people that became unemployed in the pandemic that have not gone back to work. For those people, we're in a crisis. Representative Wallner?
Yes, I just wanted to add one thing, and that is, it hasn't been said, is the department, as all state government, has been under a hiring freeze. It has been lifted now, but they were under hiring freeze for probably 9 to 10 months. So their vacancy rate was sort of artificially held down because they were not able to recruit and hire during that period. And I'm also concerned because I would like to know how this is going to affect. I know that at New Hampshire Hospital, we started the PATH program. Remember, we moved people over to the Philbrook Center, and so as a transitional housing, and then used that wing that those folks were on for children in order to start to address some of those problems in the emergency rooms. And I know that there had to be new staff hired for that. So when the governor had more staff hired in his budget, probably a part of that was because of making that adjustment and opening up those, I think it was 20 beds. So I would really, when I see 226 positions, it really concerns me that we don't have all the information we need.
So I think that's a fair point, and just to maybe complete it a little, I would point out that at the end of FY19, the authorizations was 2,916. With these reductions in the governor's budget in place, the new authorizations would be 3,000, which is more than 2,916. And that is not even counting the fact that we have 96 headcount at Sununu that can be reprogrammed. And given the vacancy rate takes us well below what was authorized at the end of FY19, I think our management at DHHS is good enough to have these flexible resources to apply to the most urgent priorities. And I'd agree with you that if we were in the room with management, making management priority decisions, I would put the Path Center very high. I certainly put it higher than the Sununu Center. So we can't do their job for them from here, but I think if we give them additional resources over what they have, and say you need to prioritize how you're going to grow, that's not unreasonable, particularly given what's happened to so many of our brothers and sisters out in the free economy. Representative Rogers.
I'm sorry, I just forgot to lower my hand.
Representative Nordgren, do you have a follow-up?
Yes, please. I'm looking at the agenda that we have, that you sent out, and I don't see any place listed where we're going to talk about the new money that Ways and Means has found and how that fits into our overall discussion. I don't know if Representative Weiler has any comments on that. I thought we should maybe just get that out on the table so we know where we are with that, and if it can maybe alleviate some of the concerns we have as we look at the pages.
I think it's a good topic, and I think the next slide that Mr. Ripple's going to put up that shows the high-level summaries may be a good place for Representative Weiler, if he wants, can talk to us about the new and improved Ways and Means ideas. Now, keep in mind, I think till Ways and Means gets an update past the House, technically, I think we're still on the same trajectory that we're supposed to live within the Ways and Means estimates. But I will defer to wiser souls on that issue. So we'll talk about it, Representative Nordgren, but there's a better moment to do it than this, I think. Department-wide reduction with exemption for certain direct services areas. So the other day, I think it was about a week ago, when we went through an exercise of reviewing Medicaid, reviewing CHIP, reviewing the developmentally disabled lines, the direct healthcare lines. I think we were unanimous that those direct care lines were things that we probably would all support, or if not all of us, a majority would support. I think all of us actually. But so the way the HB2 is being written, as I understand it, is we're going to ask for a department-wide reduction, and that, but we're going to try to exempt direct care programs so that we're still delivering health care to the most needy in our society without restricting them. So I'll let Mr. Ripple talk a little bit about how that might be worded for the certain direct service areas. But this is a department-wide reduction of 50 million, of which I understand most of it, if not all of it, can come in really good management of the higher lag as they bring people on, and the reduced personnel lines from the reductions above. So Mr. Ripple, do you want to say something there, or I'm inviting you to?
Sure. Here's how it's currently being drafted by OLS. No reductions shall be made to appropriations in the following areas: developmental services, including acquired brain disorder services and children's in-home support services, the Children's Health Insurance Program, or county programs, including the state share of funding for nursing facilities and other long-term care services. So those areas would all be exempted by from this back of the budget cut.
Then what about the Medicaid lines?
That's not being exempted, at least not in this version, because there's a lot of money in that line and the department spent significantly less than their appropriation in fiscal 20. So including that in the carve out may hinder their ability to meet this back of the budget reduction.
Right. Representative Wallner.
Kevin, have you calculated or have you had the department help you calculate how much federal money we have the potential to lose when we're reducing the general fund by $50 million over the biennium? Since most of the funding in the department also receives federal money. So how much are we really cutting the budget here?
I haven't calculated that, and I haven't received from HHS. HHS didn't know the amount that would be reduced, so they had an opportunity to do that.
So as a follow-up, could I just ask, wouldn't it really be a fairly good estimate? Aren't most of their programs a 50-50 match with the federal government, so that this 50 million really looks more like 100 million out of the department budget?
I don't know the 50-50 is the average match rate, but they certainly do get a lot of federal funds. I would have to ask the department for their estimate of how much the total budget would be reduced.
Thank you, Kevin. Thanks. I appreciate that.
So in theory, though, they have general funds that we invest that don't have federal matching money because we think it's a good thing to invest in. So we're spending general funds without federal augmentation. We also have those programs, do we not?
That's true. There are certainly general funded programs only. It really varies across the department, which is why it's difficult to give an estimate.
And I don't think you could give a really great estimate until we knew what the management team prioritized. If they're given a task to reduce general funds and they have, two accounts, one that gets federal match and one that doesn't, I would think that they're good enough managers to pick the one where they're not cutting the federal funds. I guess that's a statement and not a question. So I guess I believe in the management ability of the commissioner on down. Good leadership team. This is an opportunity for them to lead. Yes, ma'am.
I think that all becomes really complex, and you'd really have to have a lot more information, because some of the things that might be 100% general funds and no federal funds might be things that by law we are obligated to do, by state law we're obligated to do. So I don't know, it seems like I would need a lot more information, but I'm sure the department could give us sort of a estimate of how many dollars we lose every time we cut a general fund dollar. I mean, I'm sure they have some sort of an average.
So as I understand our role relative to theirs, they've been doing this since July, and they have been operating in this environment for a lot of their career. So when you say that we would need to know a lot more information than we do, I think the managers and leaders of DHHS already know vastly more than our Division III committee can ever know, because we're not in the operational flow of information. And again, as they set their priorities, I would expect them to prioritize those programs that have a statutory requirement to them. That would exceed the priority of a discretionary program that they chose to develop and implement on their own. So I don't doubt that they would have a tremendous challenge of rethinking what they wanted to do and having them think about what they need to do. Wanting and needing are two different things. I'm ready to go to Representative Weiler unless you have a follow-up.
Oh, my only follow-up is that I really feel like it is, and I'm well aware of back of the budget reductions. I understand how they work, and I actually have been part of having budgets that in the end had to have back of the budget reductions. But I don't think we've given the department any guidance in how we, as the legislature, we're here to speak for the legislature, how the legislature would like to see some of these reductions made. And I think that's our role. I think that we should have gone through more carefully the budget and decided that there were things that we didn't think needed to be done, and given the department some guidance. I know that is the hardest thing to do. But I'm very disappointed to see that what you're basically doing is just back of the budget reductions. And we haven't given the department no guidance as to what it is we would like. I personally don't have a suggestion of how we would find $50 million in general funds, but obviously other members of the committee do.
Yes, ma'am. And just to clarify a point where we agree, I think I think we agree that we should give them some guidance. And I think HB2, as we exempt certain direct service areas, that's part of our guidance. And because there are a set of federal and state laws on the books that they have to comply with, that's a lot of their guidance right there. So I would say, while I completely agree with you that we need to give them legislative guidance, I would just add that I think they have a tremendous amount of guidance to work with. Representative Weiler.
Thank you. I think we're spending too much time on this because we've been doing it for years. We've had back of the budget cuts for this agency as long as I can remember. We've done it on this agency more than any other because they are so big and so complex and they overlap in so many areas that we've quite often done this, and then they are allowed to come back to fiscal and they can reorganize and move things around, move dollars around, move people around. And I think a budget, maybe the last budget, we had them coming back with, we gave them a total number that they were allowed. And then when they had slots that were approved but not funded, they could move someone from a retirement or resignation or reorganization. They could move someone from the slot that was eliminated to a slot that was still there. And that worked. We never heard any problems about they had to stop functioning or couldn't do some particular thing. Huge agency, we've done this before, and you know, this is nothing new. I wish we wouldn't spend so much time on it. Thank you.
So is there any more commentary on the section called HB1 back of the budget sections? There are two personnel and department wide. Not seeing any. Let's talk about some HB2 adjustments. We have removed section 37. This was 1.5 million that I think we voted on last Friday, where we just removed it, and this is a reflection of removing it. This was the program that had about 800 and some odd potential applicants and no procedures for who to make eligible. So, we dropped that. Is there any comment on that? Remove section 38. We did vote on this. We took the 200,000 out of HB2 because this seemed to be the opposite of the MMIS, that this was really ongoing operations that should have been in the operating budget. So we removed it from HB2 because it didn't seem to belong there. And as we talked about it and moved it, that's when we found out that it would also provide a $600,000 federal match. So are there any comments or questions on section 38? Not seeing any that add the MMIS contract costs. This is the inverse of what we talked about up in the HB1 appropriations. Okay, so we've discussed that. So the one-time Sununu Youth Center money to help them close down is that 2.65 million. We discussed that when we were talking about the HB1 appropriations, but is there any more comment on that? Representative Wallner?
I just wondered, we're not carrying any money into 23? We just think or is the 2.65, is that non-lapsing?
Representative Weiler, you've had lead on this area. Would you respond?
Yeah, it wouldn't lapse till the end of the biennium. So if the program slides into 2023, the money's still available.
I'm not so concerned. I mean, the program would end, but I'm concerned about just things like mothballing the building, training of staff, all those kinds of things that we wouldn't necessarily be able to have all of that really completed by June 30th. So I want to just be sure that they can carry that money over into the next year to use that for that.
Well, perhaps we could footnote that particular one so that to make sure that that happens.
Okay, thank you.
So Mr. Ripple, would you take a note to just make sure that 2.65 million in 2022 is non-lapsing, so it can be invested through the 23 fiscal year?
I will, and I believe that there are 4 separate appropriations in the House Bill 2 language for Sununu Center transition costs totaling the 2.65, and I believe they're all for the total for the whole biennium.
Is there more discussion on that?
Thank you, Kevin. Thank you.
Okay, so reducing funding in section 35 by removing Alvarez and Marcel DD redesign costs. If you remember, we looked at 5 line items, and I think there was a unanimous belief that lines 1 through 4 made sense because we had little investment and great savings pretty quickly. And then where we got hung up and unable to move forward was on what to do with the DD line item. And I think Representatives Rogers and Earth talked a couple, 3 times this weekend, and apparently were unable to reach a resolution. So this reduced funding is the payback from the investments. I think it's the net of the investments with the paybacks involved for lines 1 through 4. So can we clarify that first, Mr. Ripple, that this is just 1 through 4 and it's the net? And you're on mute.
Sorry. The cost of the first 4 items per the table that the department put together last week was $3.3 million. So the amendment will contain an appropriation of $3.3 million. So this is roughly 6.7 million less than what was in the original section 35.
So is the net the 6 million minus the 3 million in investment for a 3 million net?
No, the savings shown here of 6.7 million is the reduction from the original $10,043,000 appropriation down to the new $3.3 million appropriation.
Okay, so where did we, oh, it's down below. Excuse me. I
Yes.
jumped ahead. Okay, I got it. So this line is, we're removing line 5. We're not investing in line 5. This shows the removal of line 5.
Correct.
And then the net is shown in the other. Those are 4 million and 6.2 million because those are the savings we expect to receive from the monies that we're investing in lines 1 through 4.
That's right.
All right, thank you. So hopefully everyone understands what those two lines, how they work together. Representative Wallner?
Yes, I'm really concerned that we have taken out from this proposal the DD redesign. The 38 people, we haven't really left the department anything. We took to keep working on the redesign for the DD. And what the part of it that really concerns me is learning that there are 38 people, that developmentally disabled folks, that we are providing services for and paying for services in Florida. My understanding is from the department that those services are costing between $250,000 and $500,000 per person. And besides it costing a lot, the downside to me is that they're away from their families. And it seems like we need to be moving towards getting those folks back to New Hampshire where they have family and have a support system. This seems like a very poor decision to not provide any funding, to move forward with a plan to try to bring those folks back. I think it would probably, seems to me, it would probably have been the largest savings in the end over the next several years. And if we don't have some sort of a network here in New Hampshire for those folks, there may be more people that we're sending out of state at very expensive placements. So I'm very disappointed that we did not go forward with some funding in that line to allow the department to continue the planning for trying to build a system that can care for people here in New Hampshire and not sending them out of state. So that's all I have to say.
No, that's a good summary of your viewpoint. Thank you. From my viewpoint, what has happened here is that the A&M report came very late in the process. The department had it 2 weeks before they shared it with us. When the A&M people came in here, they gave us, a decent summary, and in our testimony, we were able to get some anecdotal data points about the impact of the program. But what we have not gotten is we haven't gotten sort of a comprehensive project view where we've had a chance to challenge some of the assumptions. Like, for example, it's my understanding that all the group homes that we have developed organically within the community, and that the state funding is just a small piece of the total amount of revenue they need to operate the group homes. They rely on a tremendous amount of charitable work that comes from the community that has embraced them and built them and grew them. And that rather than using that tried and true method of kind of organic development of group homes, this is a proposal to do a top-down driven set of projects. And if those fail because they don't have the community charitable support, then the estimates of how much the state would need to invest are understated. And then if we end up paying more fully for those new 4 group homes, then what's going to happen is the other 12 or so group homes in the state, I forget the exact number, maybe it's 9, but those that have been relying heavily on charitable donations, they'll go, this isn't fair. Those 4 people are getting more state money than we are. We need our state money too. And so there's actually a potential hidden bill here that nobody is seeing and looking at because we haven't evaluated this as a total program. This feels like a really good thing to do for all of the reasons you just mentioned, but it's not ripe, I don't think, from an investment decision. And so I would encourage the department to really work on putting this together in a more programmatic view and taking it to the Senate, where the Senate at the beginning of their process can begin to evaluate this, rather than what happened to us, where we weren't allowed to even look at it until we were almost done. And so I don't think it was fair to us to be put in the position to have to make a multi-million-dollar decision affecting all of these people and then have it look like we don't care because they didn't give us the time and the program documents that we should have had. So I think that if the department thinks this is a good idea, and it sounds like it is, that they have an opportunity to go work it out with the Senate in a comprehensive programmatic view that looks at the long-term risks associated with the project. We didn't have the opportunity to do that. So your hand is up. I apologize for getting emotional there. Is there any further question on this? All right, seeing none, there will be a discussion this afternoon on section 34, the financial implications of that we have not talked about this morning, that will end up going into tomorrow's version. But I know Representative Rogers has some input in that, and I've known for a longer time that Representative Earth does as well. So this is not complete, but it's pretty darn complete. Next slide, please. I can see that. Can everyone see that? Okay. All right. So do you want to walk us through this, Mr. Ripple?
Sure, this one is pretty simple. It's simply the governor's recommended appropriation totals in House Bill 1 compared with the proposal that you just saw. So actually, I'll go back to the other document quickly. Because of these 4 items, the only ones that you'll see in the House Bill 1 totals for HHS are these right here, showing 9.9 million reduction in fiscal 22 and a 10.8 million reduction in fiscal 23. So if we then go back over here, you'll see that general fund reduction in 22 and that general fund reduction in 23. And there's an associated loss of federal funds here, which is mainly related to the removal of MMIS and the movement of that appropriation to House Bill 2. So as you can see from the note here, federal funds are dropping by 32.9 million in 22 and 34.8 million in 23, but those federal funds will be authorized by the House Bill 2 appropriation.
So am I right to hear you say that while it looks like a loss on this, in reality, it's not a loss because the fiscal committee, given that this is an HB2, can approve and receive that same amount of federal funds later?
That's true, and actually the way the House Bill 2 the way the House Bill 2 language is being drafted, the department wouldn't even need to go to fiscal to accept those federal funds.
So this is just a sheet that doesn't reflect reality, but it's the sheet that reflects the format and methodology we use at this stage.
Correct.
Representative Woolner?
Yes, Kevin, could you tie back for me the first page, the total additions, reductions to the budget as introduced?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. To this page that we are looking at.
Sure. The only thing, so you'll see here the general fund reduction in 22 of 9.9 million.
Yes.
That is the same as this figure right here. So the second page really only relates to the first part of this page, the HB1 appropriations section.
Got it. Got it. So it doesn't relate to the back of the budget reductions.
Correct, because those won't be reflected in the appropriations totals.
Okay, so this page that we're looking at here is sort of artificially low because it isn't the full picture.
The reductions are artificially low, yes.
Thank you. Thank you. It really isn't a very helpful piece. You need to look at the whole picture, not just a little bit of it. Thank you.
So the other piece that we could talk about here, if you're ready to, Representative Weiler, we already knew that the governor's budget was based on in FY22 77 or something, 77. No, it was the biennium. The biennium, the governor's budget was 77 million higher than Ways and Means. Ways and Means has now come back and informally said that they think it could actually end up being higher. Now, we've not voted on that as a House, so we're still on the trajectory from last Ways and Means, but just so that we can anticipate and plan, what can you tell us about the enhanced revenue estimates?
Discussing it with some of the other divisions, this money that has been added, there's places where they took away money that was expected to go municipalities. They took away revenue sharing, they took away state aid grants, and they took away the increase in the meals and rooms tax delivery to the towns and cities. So it would seem like there were more reductions in those areas than there were in what the governor sent us on HHS. I anticipated he'd have more reductions in HHS because of the huge growth it had in 21, but he didn't. Most of his reductions were in other areas. So if more funds are available, it seems like that's where they should be put. And also there's several people that want a speed up on the tax cuts, but looking at, had discussions with the Ways and Means, and with some people wanted the interest and dividends tax to go away in 2 years rather than 5. But that would have taken 170 or 180 million to do that, and we didn't have that much more money. And the money that we did have would seem to be more appropriate going to the towns and cities and the programs that had been suspended, because that some of those towns had come to rely on that money, especially if you're building a water treatment plant, a sewage treatment plant, and you're expecting some state aid grants and some other distributions like that, and all of a sudden, boom, they're gone. That's more of a shock than anything that happened in HHS. And if you're anticipating a better distribution of meals and rooms tax to go into your town budget, and boom, that's gone. That would seem like that was a hole that had more priority than putting more money back in HHS, especially when they already are at a point where they can't grow to the money that was given them. So that would be a more help to more people. That was the way we've tentatively decided. We haven't worked it all out yet. Thank you.
Representative Waller, you have a question?
Yes, my question's for Chairman Weiler. So I think on Friday you told us it was an additional 127 million. Is that about right?
That's
okay.
correct.
And you're saying it looks like you're looking at putting it into revenue sharing and the rooms and meals tax that goes back to communities. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And is that the whole, I mean, you're going to put the whole 127 million into those two programs?
Those are just some of the ones we discussed. We haven't discussed much with Division 2, what they thought as a need, because I haven't had a chance to talk to Karen. But Lynn and I and Jess were talking about some of these other things, and that's where we felt the need that we had seen cuts that people were expecting. So got to talk with Karen about what she might see in HB2, but she hasn't done much in the way of cutting in HB2. There might be more money going into education, and we'll have to talk about that.
Okay, that was that's what was going through my head. Are you not, I mean, are we not seeing any of this $127 million going into education, which goes directly to our communities?
I think there will be, but at this point, we haven't looked at all the figures, and I've got to get together. I haven't had the time to get together with the other divisions and say, okay, if you had more money, where would it go? But Karen and I haven't had a chance to meet, but I haven't met with Lynn. And those were her big things that, here's programs that people were anticipating, boom, were taken away from them. So you got to pay attention to those. And I haven't talked with Karen about any program she had that might have happened. And I think some of that would be in education on her budget.
So just one follow-up. So for Division 1 and Division 2, you anticipate them having at least some part of the $127 million to use to avoid reductions in their budgets. But none of that 127 million is coming to Health and Human Services.
If we collectively decide that we need more in a certain area, then certainly that will be in the mix of the discussions.
Thank you.
So I have a couple questions for you, sir. I want to understand the 127 million number. Is that 127 million in addition to what Ways and Means had been projecting? And if so, then they had a $77 million hole to begin with relative to the governor. Does this now just put us 50 million ahead of the governor's budget?
That's what I'm thinking, but I haven't had that clearly explained by Ways and Means. But that's my impression, that it only gives you an additional 50.
Thank you, sir. And then the second question would be, it's not in our division, but I had heard that there were some critical water and sewage investments that are also direct public health investments that isn't in our budget, but as a public health advocate, I would want these sewage and water projects to compete favorably.
I think we can all agree on that.
Do you have any clue how much that is? Those would be in cumulative? I don't want to, that one's.
No, I didn't look at the cut. My recollection is from previous budgets, these run around 30 million a year, something in that area.
All right. Thank you, sir. Representative Nordgren, you had your hand up, and then Representative Wallner.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm a little worried that we don't know a whole lot more from Representative Weiler about what money might come to Division 3 when it appears that you're planning to vote on the budget today in Division 3. So it seems like we've got a chicken and an egg situation. I was wondering how we can somehow get some more clear direction from the chair about what money we might have for Division 3.
That's a good follow-up. Let me say what I think is true, and then Representative Weiler, please be prepared to correct me. I think what we are supposed to do, per whether it's statute or just the rules of how we do the budget, is that the budget that we pass as a finance committee and send to the House for a vote must be predicated on the Ways and Means revenue number that we received a month or two ago when we were in session. And that we're not allowed at this point to do anything with the enhanced revenues because it hasn't been passed by the House. And so it's not a chicken or egg thing, it's a sequential thing. It starts with the Ways and Means revenue estimate, then we spend it, and then we take our budget to the House. And when we're at the House, Ways and Means may come back and say, oh, we have another vote to take on higher revenues. And that we would take that vote, and at that point, we have a budget that's below the new Ways and Means estimate, but that's the official process as I understand it and the official sequence.
What we might do is pass a budget that complies with revenue estimates adopted by the House, because that's what we're required to do. And at the same time, we could have contingency things so that if at the point they pass in this next sessions we'll have, if they pass things that are reflective of this extra 50-some million, then at that point, we can come forward and say, okay, now that the money has been accepted by the full body, then here are the contingency things that we'd like to add. And we'll have those ready to go forward as an amendment. So that's what I foresee as happening. But until we have an official appreciation by the House of the new revenue, I don't think we can do anything but try to meet that first estimate we were given.
Representative Wallner?
So, Chairman Weiler, are we doing this on Wednesday, the 7th? Is the budget on the floor on Wednesday, the 7th?
I think I had it scheduled for the 6th.
The budget's on the floor of the House on the 6th? Okay.
Well, I think the 6th was the budget briefing, but the
Yeah,
House session.
you're correct. I'm going to brief the budget on the 6th. We'll all be there, all the divisions briefing the budget on the 6th. And then we probably will vote on it on the 7th. But there's the 3 days there. I don't know when the speaker will have it. It may go by, alphabetically by committee. So we may get to it on the 7th. We may get to it on the 8th.
Okay, so if we're doing the briefing on the 6th, are we doing that? We're doing that in Bedford at the Sports Plaza, right?
Yes. Yes.
On the 6th. Okay. So the soonest we could have the budget on the floor would be the 8th. Is that correct? Because you have to have 2 days? I think that's what the rules say.
I'm trying to remember that one. I suppose
That sounds familiar with what got said in this division earlier.
I mean, I haven't thought about, I've never thought about it for 2 years, so it seems like you had to do it 2 days before you could vote on the budget, but.
Thank you for that recollection.
Well, you're in charge now, you look it up. I just trying to remember. Okay, so that would be the 8th that we would do the budget. So you're thinking that on like maybe the 7th or the early morning of the 8th or sometime like that, we would hear Ways and Means bring in these new revenue estimates. That's your thought, and then we would add to the budget you're putting on the floor.
Thanks for your help. You're having it gel in my mind a little better. Yes, that's.
I'm not here to help. No.
That's no. Well, it's been a while since I was chair of finance. It's been more recent, but yes, I think that'll be the way it'll work. Thanks for those hints.
So does that mean we need to recommend to the speaker that he special order the Ways and Means estimate to the first order of business on the 7th?
Would sure make sense, or early on the 8th.
Well, if we have it on the 7th, we just have more time to think. And because then we have to prepare our own amendment based on that, don't we? I mean, so we need OLS time.
Yes. Well, I think we can almost anticipate it being accepted. We can almost anticipate what we would like to do with the extra money. So we'll have those prepared and perhaps even have them in the calendar.
Your hand is still up, Representative Wallner.
Well, I guess I would just mention that a lot of people have been told that they're going to be in the sports arena on the 7th, 8th, and 9th. And now we're adding the 6th. And I really think that kind of thing needs to be, we need to let all of our colleagues in the House know what's going to be expected of them. So, thank you.
Hopefully we'll get it in the
I'll
next
stop
calendar.
helping. I'll stop helping.
Why should you
Thank you
stop?
for your,
I'm
thank
thanking
you
you
for
for
your
your
unintentional help.
suggestions.
All right. Are there any other comments or questions? Let's go back, Mr. Ripple, to the image of the work plan for the day. that was in that email? You know what I'm referring to?
I do. Let me just bring that up.
It's 11:12. I think we've got another hour. Let's see how we're going to invest it. I think we can talk about review of the Veterans Home and Plan. Can you just show that? And by the and plan, what I meant by that was just what we think we want to do with the Veterans Home. Because we've been talking about the Department of Health and Human Services so much. Can you bring up just the bottom line of the Veterans Home, the budget view?
Sure.
So I'm referring to the bottom line totals for the entire Veterans Home. Okay, so we've seen this, we've been briefed on it. The commandant went through the details. It is true, isn't it, Mr. Ripple, that personnel reduction does not affect this line item?
That's correct.
So what you see is what you get relative to what I understand. You don't have any amendments on this, do you, from anyone?
I don't.
I had never sensed any willingness or desire on the part of anyone to increase or decrease this part of the budget. And I had asked for, feedback last week and didn't get any on this, except I may have seen something that suggested that the blue team is in favor of supporting the Veterans Home governor's proposal. So do we need a motion, or I would like to get us past this point and saying, I'm prepared to accept the governor's budget here.
I think you could make a motion to accept the governor's proposed budget for the Veterans Home, and that would be sufficient.
Can I hear a motion? Representative Irf, you have a motion?
I would move that we accept the governor's budget for the Veterans Home.
Second.
We're having a hard time hearing you.
Is there a second? Seconded by Representative Weiler. Is there discussion on this? I'm not seeing anyone's hands raised. I think we're ready to call a roll. Mr. Clerk.
A motion to accept, what would I use for the number on this? Is this an AU, Kevin?
There are multiple accounting units. I think it's sufficient to just say the proposed budget for the Veterans Home, and that'll encompass everything.
Thank you. All right, so that's the motion to accept the governor's budget for the Veterans Home. Motion and a second, and I'll call the roll on how you vote. Representative Irf.
Yes.
Representative Weiler votes yes. Representative Bean.
Yes.
Representative Wallner.
Yes,
Representative Nordgren.
yes,
Representative Rogers.
Yes,
Representative Edwards.
Yes.
Mr. Chairman, the vote is 7-0.
Thank you. All right, with that done, we can move on to where it says our topic was going to be Hb2 Section 35 A&M, but because of the discussion that we had during the line item review, I believe that we've completed this task. Is there anyone that wants to have a second bite at the apple of talking about where we ended up with the Alvarez and Marcel report? Not seeing any. That would take us to a discussion of the SYSC HB2s. And I think earlier we discussed that there's going to be 9 amendments that we may be able to review today, and that we'll do it this afternoon. So I propose that we defer that conversation until we can just have the conversation based on actual amendments. Is there any disagreement? Anyone want to talk now about the Sununu Center? I'm not seeing any. And then on the April 12th meeting, this was for the section of HB2 that we removed from HB2 on an earlier vote, and that we want to have a meeting on the 12th of April to get more information. I've drafted a potential amendment, gotten some feedback on it. And I just wanted to make sure that folks understood that I'm actively waiting for you to submit language to me to add to it or to replace lines. So I'm in a wait mode for input. Also, I wanted to make it clear that similar to what we did on the 16th of March, where we had an afternoon that we invited people in, this is kind of that same thing. So like if Representative Rogers wanted to invite the water and sewer people from Concord to come in, I'd love to hear from them. Or anybody wanted to bring anyone in to talk about this, like, is 25 the right number for beds, or is 60 the right number for beds? Who would we invite to have that conversation with? Representative Wallner, your hand is up.
Yeah, I mean, you said something about if we wanted to add language or subtract language. I really wouldn't. I mean, this is basically an information session
It is.
for us to get information. And until I mean, I would really like to hear from people before I start doing any other kind of amendment to the language that you put out there. I'm not
Yes,
even
ma'am.
sure how we will
That's-
use that language.
Right.
So
That's a very reasonable position, and you just gave me feedback. So thank you. You were unintentionally helpful. I appreciate it.
oh, darn.
But Representative Rogers specifically called out a couple areas that she wanted a tighter rewrite. And so I'm kind of hoping she'll just send me some language and I'll cut and paste it. And that's me just trying to get ready before the meeting. It's not to foreshadow or predetermine the results, but that's kind of my way of getting organized and thinking. So, Representative Rogers, do you think you might send me a couple of sentences?
What I'm gonna do is ask the mayor to look at it and ask the city to give me what language they'd be comfortable with.
Yes, ma'am. Good idea. Great approach. All right. So are there any other questions about what we're trying? Oh, yes, sir. I don't know why I keep calling him Representative Weiler.
We probably want to hear from the corrections as well as the HHS behavioral health and how they would adapt to all this, because I'm not sure what percentage of the secure psychiatric unit would be moved from the corrections department over to mental health. Some of them will still remain, but it may affect their staffing and so on. We want to hear about that.
Yes, sir. Since those are state agencies, Mr. Ripple, can you extend those invitations to them? And what I'm looking for the committee is the kind of the non-traditional, non-state players. Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, so this afternoon is a busy day still by itself. So we'll start at 2:30 and I anticipate going into recess here in just a minute until 2:30. Representative Wallner, your hand
I'm
is up.
sorry. Yes, I'm sorry. I missed the timing on the 12th. Are we doing that in the afternoon or the morning?
I believe it's ready to go to the calendar. What did we do for the calendar? 9:30 a.m. Do you recall, Mr. Ripple?
I don't remember.
Okay, so we'll find out over lunch.
Okay,
I think I'm like 90% sure it went in for 9:30. But
if
I could,
there's any way it could be afternoon, I would appreciate that, but. you
well,
have
the
to do
reason
what-
I'm so sure that it was at 9:30 is because I recall Mr. Ripple saying that in the long range calendar, he's asked to be in the Senate in the afternoon that
Oh,
day.
okay,
That's why
thank
we
you.
picked the morning.
That's fine. We need Mr. Ripple for sure.
I think so. Representative Nordgren and then Representative Weiler.
Yes, thank you. Could we have a clarification from Chair Weiler? I think the question came up that if we were executing as a full committee on Friday, it wasn't in the calendar. So is it going to be in the new calendar or?
Yes, when we make sure that Division 2, Division 1 are finished, I think Division 1 has assured me I still have to get a hold of Karen. And I would be able to get it in Wednesday, and it would still, that calendar would begin with Friday. So it would be in a calendar that would come out Thursday. And one of the things for the afternoon's schedule, both Representative Erf and I are expected to be at a county and state finance committee meeting from 1, they're showing it 1 to 2:30 this afternoon. So either one or both of us might be absent for part of that time.
No, sir, we're going to go into recess and not come back until 2:30. And we're doing that so that you and Representative Erf can go to your meeting and not miss anything.
All right, thank you.
So, it appears that
Hang on a minute.
Representative Weiler.
Yes,
Is it a firm date that we're gonna be at the sports arena on the 6th? Or, I mean, I think that's something as Representative Wallner said, we need to be circulating among the membership of the House. So I'm just wondering if that's been reserved for us or what?
that was my latest conversation with the speaker and the chief of staff. I'll make sure that that's ending up in the calendar. I'll be seeing them later this week.
Okay, maybe you can let us know after you have that conversation.
Okay.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Okay, is there any, so we'll go into recess with the idea that we'll come back at 2:30. Representative Weiler, if you could, sir, I want to give you a call. I just need to check some notes with you, sir. Okay, I'll call you on your cell phone here shortly.
All right, I got a call here. I got to answer now. So yeah, give it 10 minutes.
Yes, sir. Okay, so if you'll stop the recording and put us on recess till 2:30,
Great.
Mr. Ripple. Let's start recording. We're now recording, and we're coming back Division 3 from this morning. We've recessed, and let's take a look at the things we're going to do this afternoon. Could you, Mr. Ripple, show us the?
Or
And you can scroll down. We did complete the morning agenda. So this afternoon, we're going to start by talking about 254, then section 26, section 34. There's actually kind of two parts to that HB. There's the HB amendments that have been offered, and then there's also the discussion of the family planning HB1 budget area that we'll talk about. Both Representative Erf and Representative Rogers have some prepared thoughts. I'm not sure what we'll see, but they can certainly speak and show what they've got. And then we'll discuss them to see if there's any natural overlap and decide what to do. HB2 is just, is that HB2 available, the MMIS moving into HB2?
That amendment is ready, yes.
And HB2 personnel, is that ready?
That would be, it's a House Bill 1 amendment, but yes, that one is ready.
Okay, and then the HB2 of the back of the budget, the $50 million biennium cut, is that's also an HB?
It's also an HB1. I haven't gotten that one back yet.
Okay. So maybe you'll get it by then, but if we don't have them both on so that we can kind of look at them really kind of together, I think we'll end up pushing those till tomorrow. I think it's unavoidable for us to get together tomorrow at 2 p.m. But we'll see. And then it's not on what Mr. Ripple is showing, but over lunch we got a request to consider a CFI footnote that nobody has seen yet other than Representative Wallner, myself. I think Representative Erf may have had a chance to glance at it. We'll talk about that. And then we'll see where we're at. Are there any questions about what we're going to do this afternoon? Not seeing any. Would you bring up the HB2 on 254? Share it.
So by that, you mean which document?
I mean the HB2 where we took the incarceration standards of 254 and we put it into an HB2 language.
Well, you haven't yet put that in, and I don't think I've gotten that amendment back yet. I think that's one of the ones I'm waiting on.
If I've not given that to you, then I've miscommunicated and dropped the ball. But the idea was, and then it's still subject for the committee to discuss. But the idea was that we would take the meat of the HB 254 new incarceration standards, put them into HB2 language, consider it in HB2 as an add, and then the possibility remained that we would vote to retain HB 254 in case we needed to do more work on it over the fall.
Okay, right. And that is the text of House Bill 254 is one of the amendments that I sent to OLS as part of the Sununu Center package, but it's one of the ones that I haven't gotten back.
Okay, so, okay, good. So let's skip over that because I don't think we can go into 254 without that HB to discuss. HB section 26. Do you have that sheet where we're showing progress on our HBs?
I can bring it up. Just one moment.
Can I offer an update?
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
All right, discussions over the break with the leadership and dates. So now they don't want me to do the final exec session this Friday. They want it to be in the calendar for 4 days. So they want our final exec session to be on the 30th, next Tuesday. So that's next week. And then, so the 30th for the exec session. Then on the, for the joint commission or for the briefing to the House, that will be on the 5th because as Representative Wallner pointed out to us, you have to have 2 days from the time you brief the budget until we vote on it. So we will brief it on the 5th. That will be probably a Zoom meeting, not a meeting in the Athletic Center. So on the 5th, it won't be a meeting in the Athletic Center, or the 6th, it won't be a meeting in the Athletic Center. It will be a Zoom session Some of us will be sitting in the House chamber and doing the briefing from there to the rest of the legislature that chooses to Zoom. And as I pointed out to them, we are restricted at this point by law, I would say, that we cannot come out with a budget that is higher than the original estimates we were assigned by the House Ways and Means, even though they've given us a recent update. But what we'll probably do, we'll give a briefing based upon the budget that we have to do by law. And then we'll go in on the 7th. The first thing will probably be a new estimate. And then I think we will be ready, got enough days to work on this, to have a contingency plan. Okay, there's the budget we gave you. Now we have an extra, I think, 50 million. Here's the plan to spend it. And so we would bring that up then after they have updated the income or the revenue. So I think that's the only way we can do it. I think that's what I explained to leadership. So we'll present one budget and we'll do a contingency budget on the 7th. Okay, thanks.
Representative
for your help.
Representative Rogers raised,
Remind-
Representative Rogers raised her hand.
Representative Weiler, which
Yes.
budget will be presented in the calendar and given to people then? The one that we're going to give them first that's according to law, or the real budget?
The one according to law. And-
So when will they see the real budget? That day on the floor, or?
Well, I can't think of any other way, because here's the numbers you were given. Here's the numbers you've got to produce a budget to, brief on the budget. Until we have an update officially accepted by the legislature, there's nothing we can do to present an additional spending plan until we have the additional revenue accepted and presented and accepted. So, but knowing that, I think I will ask the LBA when they print up the document that will go out on the screen, that here's the rumor. If it happens, here's the contingency that will be added in.
So they should probably get it ahead of time then, because I was just thinking.
Yeah, so that way they know to
All
expect it.
have- Okay,
What do you think of that?
that'll work better, because I think otherwise people are going to be so confused that,
Yeah. Why do you brief us on this budget, then you're talking at the 7th about the budget? So
yeah,
the way I can think of doing it, and I'll put language in there to that effect.
okay, thank you.
By law, what we are required to present. But we expect to hear this because we've been briefed a few days in advance by Ways and Means. If that is presented, accepted, then will be the new numbers. And I'll try to explain that in that handout. Thank you very much. Thank you for all you people that have had experience with this in the past from helping me out. Thank you.
Representative Nordgren, I think would like to ask you a question, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair, both chairs. So I think in discussions I've had with other people, I've wondered if the fact that those numbers have to be presented before we can present our budget, is that in an RSA or is that in House rules, or where do we see that documented that that's what we have to do? The process, is the process written someplace or in a document when we can see?
To tell you the truth, it's what I remembered from the dozen budgets you and I have seen. I don't remember going back into the laws and reading it. It's just what I recall from all the past budgets, that this is the number you got to budget to. And you know, and in all those cases, I don't think we ever had a revised figure that we could work from. So.
But we don't know if it's a rule that the House has established or that it's an RSA.
When I start working on the handout that'll go out on the 5th, I will research it and reference the RSAs or the rules, whichever one I come up with.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
So it will be published, so we'll all see it. Thank you.
All right. Any further discussion around that? And I think I also heard you say that there will probably be a special order to have the Ways and Means update the revenue numbers like the first day of the first moment of the first day.
Correct. And probably
So-
right after that, we can go forward with what we would have warned them on the 5th may happen.
And if that all comes to bear, we should in theory be ready for some floor amendments that might be published in advance.
Yes.
So did you have another question, Representative Nordgren?
Yes, thank you. Obviously, the Democrats will be briefing our caucus on the budget, so I assume the Republicans will be briefing their caucus on the budget. So we can explain to each caucus the process. Is that what you anticipate?
Yeah, I hope we all can explain the same process and that everybody will see it in the handout on the 5th and the briefing on the 5th. And, you know, and then I'll also have it, as I said, that you and I remember, there's always a handout that goes out to people and we'll be showing it on the screen and maybe putting it up on a website that here's what we plan to do. Here's what we have to do. Here's what we plan to do. We expect to see a revised revenue. So hope, like you say, make sure everybody sees it and has it written down. And we don't say, what the hell are you people doing? So
Right.
hopefully it'll all work out. If you got any more ideas of what I can do to make sure everybody knows what the process is, let me know.
Okay, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions, so I think we can start with the agenda for the afternoon, which is we just skipped over 254, but can you bring up HB2 Section 26 so we can see it?
Did you want to start with that, or did you want to start with the document showing the status of House Bill 2 sections?
The second thing you just said.
Okay.
Okay, so this is one of the last HB2s that we have to discuss, and there's
Yes, that's right.
We have an amendment now to look at, don't we?
You do, and it would simply, actually, hold on one second. I think I brought up the wrong one, but yes, you do have an amendment. And I will go grab that now.
I noticed white space on section 35, and I don't have any notes on that, so
That is the appropriation for the Alvarez and Marcy
yeah.
recommendations. We have an amendment ready for that too. Let me just pull up section 26 here.
You think we're going to be able to talk about the amendment to section 35 this afternoon? If so, I'll add it to my notes.
I think you can talk about it, yes. So this, in the governor's recommended trailer bill, HHS's special transfer authority would have been extended until July 1st, 2023, and this would extend it instead to the end of the biennium.
And the section 26 that was introduced had January 1, 2023, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay. And which member sponsored this amendment? Could we scroll up a little? There he is. Okay, so so just to tell you all, my name is on there because of protocol. I actually don't support this amendment. I don't know why we would replace our judgment with the governor's. The governor office made a very specific decision that January 1, 2023 was the right date, and instead of listening to the governor, who is the chief executive, we're listening to the department. And I don't know, there's a chain of command and that I would tend to respect. So, but I got the sense from the committee that this is what you want. And so, so if there's an amendment to, or a motion to accept this amendment, we can go ahead and discuss it and vote it out. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second?
I'll second.
Motion and a second to adopt this. Is there any further discussion? And okay, so just to complete the thought, I'm going to vote against this, but I want everyone to just vote the way they want to vote because it's your vote. So is there any other discussion? Nope, not seeing any. Mr. Clerk, would you take a roll?
Hang on, now it's not good. All right, so the amendment number is 0931 to HB2, which adopts section, changes 26. If you're in favor, you'll say yes. If you're opposed, you'll say no. Representative Earth,
Yes.
Representative Weiler votes yes. Representative Bean,
I vote no.
okay. Representative Wallner,
Yes.
Representative Nordgren,
Yes,
Representative Rogers,
yes,
Representative Edwards.
No.
Mr. Chairman, the vote is 5-2.
Okay, so next up is HB2 Section 34, and there's two amendments to Section 34 that we're going to discuss. And before we discuss that, I do want to talk about all of the email that we received. And I don't know, I received a lot of email. I suppose the rest of us have it as well. And, you know, I think the email that we received by and large is consistent with the whole idea of being transparent and open to the public. I mean, the fact that we got so much email would suggest there was some level of transparency. But there was one email in particular, I wanted to read to the committee and to talk to the public about for just a moment. Because in the last couple of years, our society and our politics have been increasingly coarsened, and we are acting less and less as civilized as we should. So this one email, I won't read who sent it, writes, I and 60% of New Hampshire residents oppose your anti-abortion gag rule. You had to resort to dirty tricks because for every woman you stand in front of House reps, I can bring in 100, and that's no joke. I will get your names and addresses, and I will mobilize these women to protest outside of your homes if need be. These will be peaceful protests, but relentless. Your lack of integrity is appalling, and you should be ashamed. And I think that's the end of the email. And I think the United States and New Hampshire is a nation and a state where the rule of law matters. And we have behaved as volunteer legislators in accordance with that rule of law. There was a bill introduced. There was a valid amendment offered. We heard the amendment. We took testimony. We've received email. We've thought about it. Our role is to receive the amendment and do what we've done. Listen to testimony, discuss it, vote on it. The resorting to what comes very close to an anarchist threat, violating the sense of security of our families, is too far. And I would ask the person who wrote that, or anyone who'd be tempted to write like that, to remember that we do this as volunteers because we have a sense of civic duty and civic pride. And that sort of threat is just wholly inappropriate to our process. And that's what I have to say about that. So, Mr. Ripple, if you could bring up the original Section 34 and then be prepared to bring up the Leon amendment and then my amendment, please.
Sure.
Okay, so I'm sure everyone's had a chance to look at this, but I just did want to have everyone recall that the original section 34 requires us to comply with Title 19 of the Social Security Act. And with that, let's look at the Leon Amendment. Okay, so that's all too big to fit onto one page, but I think we've all read it. Oh, there we go. All right. So we received a tremendous amount of feedback on this. There was a lot of reference to opposing a gag rule. I don't know if that's a pejorative or a historically accurate term, but it's been referred to as a gag rule. And then there was testimony from the Hospital Association that this last section, Section 2, put a burden on hospitals that provide abortions. So I think we should look at the next amendment. For a sense of history, the gag rule expression came up in the 1830s when Congress prohibited itself from talking about anti-slavery bills. History indicated that the gag rule was not a good thing. Okay, so this is an amendment that I think represents the essence of what the Leon Amendment wanted to do. I think the key element of this is that it would require that family planning programs that receive family planning money from the state be physically and financially segregated from reproductive health facilities. And that term loosely is defined in statute to what is the equivalent of a freestanding independent abortion clinic. So, so this is requesting that anyone providing family planning would be physically segregated from abortion providers. It deletes restrictions on counseling, and it eliminates hospitals from being involved in this legislation. So I think this is a better amendment. Whether or not it's sufficient, I think maybe what we ought to do for a few minutes is to try to talk about these two things and get a sense of where people are at in terms of these two choices. Representative Rogers.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, I think we all got the emails that you talked about, and it was no one that I had ever heard of before. And I think that from someone that gets these kind of emails quite often, I too am alarmed by getting emails like that. And so I appreciate what you said. And I do appreciate you attempting to come up with a compromise amendment here. However, the physical separation is something that's quite impossible to comply with by a number of the health centers we're talking about. these health centers are not in any way rich, I guess is the first word that comes to my mind. They're not blessed with a large amount of money. They live day to day quite often. The money, federal monies that they've had to do without in the past couple of years has been quite difficult for them. One of the amendments you'll see later that I'm bringing in talks about that funding and how to deal with it. When we force the health centers to basically redesign their buildings, maybe even build separate buildings so they can offer people the ability to obtain an abortion. And I understand that some people don't want to have that ability there. That's understood. People have disagreements, but by this amendment, what you're doing is forcing these facilities to either stop accepting any kind of money for the other services they do, which is providing health care to a larger number of people of state, or to stop offering abortions, which is something that a lot of people do need to have in the state for whatever reason that may be. You're making it basically totally impossible for them to comply with this. And you're forcing them to redesign their entire health center. And I've got to remind you that these health centers provide services to the state that are very important. In fact, during the pandemic time, in the fiscal year 2020, 97% of the chlamydia and gonorrhea testing in the program that Health and Human Services offered was completed by these providers. And I know you served on Health and Human Services before coming to finance, so you're well aware that those two diseases and STDs in general are in an epidemic proportion in this state. The patients also, cancer screening, 89% of Pap tests, 67% of breast exams are done by these providers. Our low-income women go to these providers for their health care. They don't have other places to go. So by forcing all of these centers to make a decision, basically what you're doing is telling them that either abortions will not be available in the state, or that they have to stop serving the clientele that they serve. And that's really an impossible decision. It's a Sophie's choice, where many of our legislators are what you would call pro-life or anti-choice, and many of us are what you would call pro-choice, or they would say anti-life. There's a split down the middle on this. And I don't think the Finance Committee should be in a position of saying whether the legislature is either anti-choice or anti-life or whatever label we want to put on it. The language that's been in here for a number of years is probably equally uncomfortable for both sides, but it's a compromise that's been reached and we've all learned to live with. There are no state or federal monies that go towards performing abortions. And that's something that's been made clear over and over again. Why we need to take it to the next level, why we need to have the Finance Committee make a policy decision on probably next to gun positions, one of the most controversial things this House deals with. I don't see why we want to put ourselves in that position. God knows we have enough things else we can disagree on. So I guess what I'm asking is that we not deal with either of these amendments, that we find both of them inexpedient, and we stick with the language that's there. I'm sure I'm as equally as unhappy with the language that's there as you are. But at least, isn't that what they always say a good compromise is something that both sides aren't happy with, but they can live with? Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other comments? I have comments to make, but I want to not exceed my privilege here. I think we should hear from people. Okay, so here are some thoughts. This family planning money is in the budget. The family planning program is something I think we can all agree on. And in an effort to agree on what we agree on, I think we all agree that having accessible, and that means financially and physically accessible STD checks and family planning counseling for birth control and the like those are good societal investments. I think that most of the clinics that accept the family planning program money historically have not also operated under the same roof as the, I will refer to it as a reproductive health facility, even though personally I think that's a tremendously Orwellian and inappropriate term for what operation is done there. But abortion is a constitutionally protected medical procedure. And although I'm pro-life, I'm also very pro-constitution. I am not wanting to attack the right of a woman to have an abortion because the constitutional arguments have been weighed and have held that a woman has that right, certainly in the first trimester. And so I was very comfortable with removing what has been referred to as the gag order, because I think it would be totally inappropriate to have a medical counselor presenting a woman with all of her options on birth control and prohibited by the state to speak about one of the options that she may have should she become pregnant. So, I'm on board with the notion that it would be inappropriate to try to ban those kinds of communications. So where am I falling on this? I'm falling on my background in radiology administration and understanding the Stark Act and the purposes of the Stark Act dating back 40 years as kind of an anti-kickback program. And the basic premise of the anti-kickback law was that if a provider was going to profit from the medical referral, then that provider should not own the facility that they refer to. And clearly, Planned Parenthood does not fall under the Stark Act, but I'm using it as an example to explain the principle that the organization that's doing the medical counseling should not have a financial incentive to skew their recommendations towards one medical procedure over another. And I think the value of a physical and financial segregation is to ensure that medical counseling is done with the full focus on the woman and her family's needs without being jaundiced possibly by a profit incentive of referring somebody over to the abortion wing of the facility. And so for the principles of anti-kickback and the principles of the Stark Act, although not legally applicable, the principle I think is still there. And so I am actually in favor of this stripped down amendment. And I think that some current historical providers may choose not to continue to provide service. They may choose not to compete for these family planning dollars. But as we heard, there were alternative medical facilities within 2 miles of every reproductive health facility taking a family planning contract. And so we have good reason to believe that substitute providers will enter into the competition, and maybe given that there's fresh competition, we might actually benefit from free market competition a little bit to see if we can get better overall services. So I do think that this is a legitimate HB2, although there's a big policy issue here. I think there's also the financial issue. The financial issue is, should we accept, what do we believe? Do we believe that competition will increase and improve services, or do we think that maintaining what's become sort of a hardwired, non-competitive environment is the right way to go? So I would like to ask for support for this this amendment 0940H. Representative Rogers, your hand is up.
Yes, I have a question. So are you saying that you actually believe that the family health clinics are making a profit off abortions, and so they're counseling people to get abortions as a form of birth control?
I don't think it's that direct. I think there's wide belief that money is fungible, and that the money that is funding the side of the accounts dealing with family planning and family planning counseling are not directly paying for abortion, but given that they're being offered by the same provider, it is recognized in the principles of the Stark Act that there should be separation within the referral pattern. And I think that's been accepted for 40 years. It's barred orthopedic surgeons, for example, from owning their own radiology services. So if somebody comes in with a broken arm, the orthopedic surgeon needs to refer to an independent radiology business and not just refer to themselves and their own owned equipment. And so I think the spirit of separating an orthopedic surgeon from owning radiology equipment is not that different in concept from requiring a separation from a family planning counselor from the provision of the abortion. That's what I believe.
I would just caution you, if I could have follow up on this.
Yes. Yeah. No, we're having a conversation. Neither bill has been introduced, so we're just talking.
I guess I would ask you to go to one of these clinics, first of all. If you've ever been to one, I'd ask you to go again and talk to some of the women that are patients there. If you have an abortion, it's far different than having an orthopedic surgeon work on your arm or your leg. It's a far harder decision, and it's a far different feeling than having someone operate on you as any other thing that would happen. It's something that, fortunately, Representative Edwards, you would never have to deal with. But people that work in these clinics, first of all, have to suffer with wondering if they're going to be bombed, wondering if someone's going to shoot them when they leave, often going through picket lines when they get in to go to work. And the people that they deal with, they work very hard to counsel them with a lot of things. And I assure you that abortion is one of the last things that a woman does when they're under these situations. And it's not something that they counsel someone to do to make a profit. There's a lot of other things that goes on at this clinic other than abortions, and a lot of other things to save women's lives that happen. And to have an abortion, and to liken having an abortion to having surgery on your arm is very, very wrong kind of likeness. It's very different. And
I do appreciate that as an attorney, you probably understand the distinction in the analogies. My analogy is for the anti-kickback incentive of the counselor, not the very difficult decision of the woman. That's why I'm perfectly good with removing the gag order, so that women can receive counseling on their full range of options, so that they can make that very difficult decision in an informed way. What I think this amendment does is it removes the hidden finger on the scale of counseling to make sure that the counseling is offered without a profit incentive to bias their counseling potentially.
But what I'm saying,
you asked me to go visit a family practice, or excuse me, a reproductive health facility, and I did, as a member of HHS, go spend time with the Honorable Polly Campion, and I think Representative Mary Kay. Oh God, it's killing me that I'm missing her last name. But anyways, I have gone and I met Ms. Kyla Montgomery there, and we spent a lot of time talking about it. And if, as I remember, I recommended to them that they do a much better job of advertising and marketing the fact that they're providing STD services and to report to the public in a more transparent way what the trends were so that people's behavior could be modified by the information. I gave them some advice on how to make their services more useful to the society. So I've been there, and although I'm pro-life, I am also sworn to protect this medical procedure. So on a personal level, the first time I went into an abortion center was as a young man. And when I was never mind, I'm going to tell that story. But it's a personal story where this is a very real issue to me. And as a father of 2 daughters, as a brother of 4 sisters, I don't minimize or take lightly the difficulty of the decision that the woman has to make. What this amendment does is it doesn't affect the woman's choice at all. It affects who is providing the family planning counseling. And it's doing it on the basis of ensuring that there is no financial incentive to counsel more in one direction than another. Your hand is up.
Yeah, if I could make just one last point, is I said, it's not just the woman that's there. The counselors have to work in an environment that is, as we can see from around the country, quite often a target for not only protests, but violent protests, for bombing, for all kinds of things. So they are under a lot of pressure, and they are not given an incentive. They do not make bonuses for the amount of abortions that they counsel people to have. They are not told to counsel people to have abortions. There's no finger on the scale. These are counselors that are committed to being helpful to women. They're committed to their cause, so to speak, for women's health. So it's not a business. It's something that they are committed to, and they're committed to women's health. So that's why I have a little bit of a problem with this. And I also do think it's an impossibility for the ones that exist to ask them to build a new facility so that it's physically separate is an impossible situation for them to make. So while I appreciate your intent, I think that this will in fact put some people out of business. And I'm not so sure that there will be other competition, or that we will not limit women's accessibility. In other states, this kind of thing going into statute has in fact limited the amount of places. And in some states actually, and I'm forgetting the state right now, but it's one state that it, and my understanding is it actually took away any center where someone could get an abortion in the state. They had to go elsewhere. So I thank you for your intentions. And I guess we just have to agree to have opposing views here.
Right. And obviously, no one is going to change anyone's mind in this discussion. You know, I think our objective is to be clear on our own positions so that those positions can be understood. I think we're long past changing anyone's mind on this particular topic. And you've twice mentioned the threat of violence, and the threat of violence in any situation is potentially there. And many years ago in another part of the country, there was in fact some violence, but I think we're very fortunate that we've never experienced that sort of thing in New Hampshire. So at least not that I know of. Representative Nordgren.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just piggyback on what Representative Rogers is saying. And I think one of my big concerns will be the North Country and the parts of the state that are already underserved by all medical professions. And I think that this could bring an extra burden to that part of the population of New Hampshire. So I think that should be a concern in our discussion. Thank you.
And I share your concern, and it was my understanding from Mr. Tierney's testimony that what we'll call the northern providers were not also providing the reproductive health facility services, i.e. outpatient abortion centers, that they were providing family planning without the abortions. And if a woman chose an abortion, the referral would have to be down to Concord or another place performing the procedure in the state. So I don't know that this is a risk at all to those facilities, because they've been receiving family planning money. They'd continue to get family planning money, and potentially, because we're reopening this up to more aggressive competition, you know, maybe we'll have more money to stretch further. Your hand is still up. I don't know if you want to
Yes.
respond to my response.
Could I just please react to your comment? I resent.
Yes, ma'am. No, we're having a conversation. Please do.
Okay, I resent your characterization of abortion buildings. I mean, I think that's not the context we're talking about.
Thank you. I accept your resentment. Sorry. So, is there any further discussion on this? I would entertain a motion of recommending OTP on Amendment 2021-0940H.
I would move that we recommend Amendment 0940H to HB2 to replace Section 34.
Is there a second? Seconded by Representative Weiler. Being moved and seconded, is there further discussion? Not seeing any discussion. Mr. Chair, or Mr. Clerk, would you please take a roll?
Okay. For Amendment 0940H. If you're in favor of adopting the amendment, you'll say yes. If you're opposed, you'll say no. Representative Erf.
Yes.
Representative Weiler votes yes. Representative Bean.
Yes.
Representative Wallner.
No.
Representative Nordgren.
No,
Representative Rogers.
No,
Representative Edwards.
Yes.
Mr. Chair, the vote is 4-3.
Thank you. Now, Mr. Ripple, as I understand the procedures, we have no need to discuss or vote on the Leon amendment. We could, having passed this amendment, we can move on. Is that
That's correct. If no one offers the other amendment, you don't need to do anything with it.
Is there anyone wanting to offer the Leon amendment for discussion and potentially a vote? Not seeing any. I think what we can do at this point is move on to HB1 to take a look at the family planning lines. In general, we have Representative Erf, who's done some analysis, Representative Rogers, who's done some analysis. And in general, what I understand to be the case is that when the previous federal administration was in office, they removed funds from reproductive health facilities at the federal level, and that the state in the current budget year decided that it would be good to invest enough money to fill that gap. And the expectation is that the current federal administration will return to the previous policy of direct funding reproductive health facilities. And so there's an issue of what should we be doing with the general funds, given that the availability of federal funds is going to be different in the current, in the future, in the next budget that we're working on relative to the current budget that we're in. And so with that as a backdrop, Representative Ruff, will you, are you able to share your screen? Has Mr. Ripple let you do that, or is he sharing your screen, or how's that working?
Mr. Ripple has all the information.
Let me just pull it up here. Did you want me to start with the amendment itself, Representative Ruff?
Yes, please, Mr. Ripple. That's the budget, correct?
Yes.
Yeah.
This might be, yeah, this is the wrong one. Hold on a second. There we go.
So this proposal funds the family planning budget at what it has been historically in preceding bienniums and accounts for the actual spending. In 2016, the actual spending was $1,168,412. In 2018, the actual spending was $1,260,946. This budget is $1,042,643 in FY22 and $1,054,417 in FY23. The federal Title X allotment for New Hampshire is $800,000. While recent budgets have included a much larger amount, $600,000 of that has not flowed through New Hampshire, but went directly to Planned Parenthood in New Hampshire. Title X funding can be used for overhead and pharmaceuticals in addition to family planning services. In the recent past, Medicaid funding for family planning services was expanded. Minors now qualify for Medicaid family planning funding based on their own income and not that of their parents. This means essentially all minors qualify for Medicaid family planning services, which are independent of the Title X services. At the same time, the income threshold for adults to qualify for Medicaid funding for family planning services increased in a manner similar to that for the expanded Medicaid for healthcare. This means many more adults also qualify for Medicaid family planning services. This means clinics have two revenue streams supporting family planning services: Medicaid funding, which comes directly from the federal government, and Title X funding, which in New Hampshire can come via the state or Planned Parenthood. Medicaid funding covers family planning services without limit, while clinics can use their Title X funding to cover their overhead and pharmaceuticals. This can be seen in the recent family planning contracts approved by the Executive Council, where the services component of the contracts has trended down as that is covered by Medicaid. In addition, recent changes allowing for the use of telehealth in providing family planning services, and a change in prescribing pharmaceuticals allowing for 12-month prescriptions rather than 3 months, means costs of services have decreased as well. The net effect is that New Hampshire need not be as financially involved with the provision of family planning services as it has been. In fact, in our neighboring state of Maine, the state is not involved at all with Title X funding. That funding flows directly to Family Planning Association of Maine, Inc. And there is the budget that I just described to you that Kevin's got up on the screen.
So if you could, Mr. Ripple, highlight some of the key numbers here so we can see the key takeaway. So
Okay.
in FY22, it looks like the governor's bill as introduced to the House had $2.977 million in the governor's budget. Am I reading that right?
Yes.
And that Representative Ruff is recommending a reduction of 1.934 million for a net of 1.042 million in general funds for FY22.
That's the total appropriation. The general funds are down here.
Did you enlarge this at all, Kevin?
Sure.
So Representative Erf, I can understand the basic construct that the federal money was not available in the current budget. And so New Hampshire stepped up its contribution to make up for the gap. And I can accept the concept that now that the federal government's going to step back in with its funding, New Hampshire no longer needs to continue to provide that gap fill because there's no gap anymore. I'm having a hard time seeing these numbers and matching it to those two concepts. Can you help me with that?
No, I don't understand what you're asking. So if you go back, as I said, to 2016 and 2018, the family planning budgets were comparable to what I have there in that budget. If you're only looking at the current biennium, you're looking at basically, you'll notice there's two lines there now, 102 and 103. 103 did not exist prior to this current biennium. And what happened was when this budget was created, as you indicated, at the time, the federal government was preventing monies going to Planned Parenthood through Title X funding. You'll notice though that the number there in the 102 line, that's pretty much the same. In other words, that didn't change from the biennium before, from the year's biennium before, or to my proposal in this biennium. What happened was $1.6 million was added in per year to get around the federal Title X restrictions. Now, in fact, I think we may recall that Ms. Rounds told us that in fact that 1.6 million is not what flowed through the state of New Hampshire. $800,000 flowed through the state of New Hampshire. Same as the $800,000 that's in the budget that I've proposed. The other money, and I don't actually even believe it was necessarily $800,000. I think it might have been $600,000. But in any case, that money went directly to Planned Parenthood. So it's a little difficult to compare apples to apples on the one hand. On the other hand, the budget doubled essentially. Even if you exclude the $600 went directly to Planned Parenthood, the budget doubled in this most current biennium from the bienniums prior to that. And all I'm proposing is that we bring it back to the way it was budgeted prior to the current biennium.
Representative Nordgren, question?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was wondering if maybe Kayla from Planned Parenthood is on, if she could comment. I thought there was a large gap between when our funding ends and the feds take over again. So I'd just like a clarification on that, please.
So let's let Representative Rogers do her piece. And if we still need a participant, then we can consider it at that point, because Representative Rogers may have the answer you're looking for.
Okay, thank you.
Representative Rogers, are you and Mr. Ripple prepared to show your version?
I believe he has the amendment, yes. Basically, what my amendment does is fills the gap that Representative Erf says doesn't exist. It is true that the federal monies, the Biden administration has says that the federal gag rule is going to be lifted and the federal monies will in fact come back. However, the federal monies won't flow back into the state for probably approximately 9 months. So there will be a 9-month gap. So the amount that I've put in here in the general funds would serve to get us through those 9 months when the federal monies will not be coming. And that's why I've increased the lines in the general fund to cover that amount of time. And 2 years ago, yes, it's true, we did increase the general fund, but that was in anticipation of the federal funds decreasing. And also, as I said previously, the fact that we are in the midst of, and we were 2 years ago, epidemic of STDs. And these family planning clinics were doing, as I said, 97% of the testing on these STDs. And they in fact had grown at the amount of exorbitant, I can't remember the exact percentage 2 years ago, but the STDs had grown an exorbitant amount and very fast. And the department was quite concerned about this epidemic of the STDs. We wanted to try to get a handle on it. And there was no funding in any place else for it. So we wanted to try to deal with that, which is part of the reason that we increased the funding, was to deal with that epidemic that was going on. So there was a large jump to deal with those two things, along with the anticipation of the cutback in the federal funds. And in fact, those federal funds did decrease and were not gained during that time. If you recall, Karen Rons did tell us that the federal money actually shouldn't be in this budget, that it goes to the centers directly. And she had put it in here for us to see what it amounted to. But it does go to the clinics all separately, is my understanding. But the figure that I've got is for a 9-month period of time. And hopefully will cover the clinics until that federal money comes in.
Can I ask you a question about that?
Sure, I'll try to answer.
Okay, so I'm trying to process what you're saying, and what I would expect to see on line 103 is that first 1.6 million we're thinking isn't going to start. Well, wait a second. If 1.6 million is a year, why wouldn't 9 months be 1.2 million?
These are the numbers that I got from the folks in the family planning clinics, that this was the amount they would need to get through the 9 months. I got numbers from them for 3 months, 6 months, and 9 months. So, and I decided to go for 9 months since it was the time I needed. So I can't break it down for you. This was the number I reached out to get. And this is what I came back with and what I gave Kevin, so.
So do we expect the current administration to be more generous in its family planning spending than what occurred before the previous administration?
I don't know whether they will be or not. I think that that's something we're all waiting to see. I think it'll be more generous, obviously, than the last 4 years. But if you're asking me if it will be more generous than the 4 years prior to that, I think that would be just conjecture.
Do you have questions, Representative I'm sorry. I heard some speaking,
No,
but.
I said, it would just be like blind guessing on my part to answer that.
Representative Irf, do you have questions?
Well, just a couple of points. I actually don't understand what this gap is that's being referred to, but the current Title 10 family planning grants made in 2019 apply through March 31st of 2022. That'd be next year. That's one point. So I'm not sure what the gap is. The other point, though, is that all STD testing is free under Medicaid, which is completely independent of the Title 10 funding.
Okay, I think I would benefit if Representative Rogers and Representative Irf talked to each other and bounced their numbers around, and that we revisited this tomorrow. I'm not really doing a good job with sort of the dueling spreadsheets, and I have to look at them both and think about them. Is Representative Irf and Representative Rogers, are you willing to spend some time today to try to compare notes and figure out what you can agree on?
Sure.
I'd be happy to speak with Representative Rogers. We're in two very different places, we didn't begin from the same place.
Yes, sir. That's why I asked you to figure out what you can agree on.
Okay.
Okay. So I take it as a given that there's going to be disagreement, but I think it would benefit the committee if you guys were able to explain to us what you can agree on this, and then what the distinctions are between you. And then I think we'd be ready to vote tomorrow. Is that all right?
Yep.
All right. So what is next on our agenda? Okay, I think we're ready to look at that HB2 on the legacy, the MMS legacy.
Okay.
And this is not numbered. This would be a new HB2. Representative Nordgren, did I miss you? Did you have a question or comment? Okay.
Well, I think I may have misnumbered the MMI